This panel has been put together by the Times, the Sunday Times, and some of you will know they do a publication called Parent Power. Ben, who's the editor of the Sunday Times, was going to be on the panel today, but he can't come, unfortunately. But we're really fortunate instead to have Helen Davies, who's the editor of Parent Power. So if some of you have probably read it and felt empowered by in the years past, if you feel like it didn't quite empower you the way that you'd like it to empower you, you've got a good chance to talk to Helen afterwards and tell her what you'd like to have in it that's not there currently. Right. And with Helen and Ben selected our panel very carefully to have two quite contrasting schools. Independent schools have quite similar buildings often, but are actually very different. And Shaun is headmaster of Reigate Grammar School, has a rather famous alumnus who he might mention or he might not. Will is head of Bedales, which used to be thought of as quite a scary school by all the other independent schools, and maybe it still is by some. And he'll talk a bit about. Well, I'm sure we'll dive into things that are different or similar about those schools. So we have prepared a rather alarming number of questions, and we're not going to get through all of them, but we're going to try and give it a good go. And I think the format we're going to follow is that I'll kick off with the kind of pre-prepared questions, and then Helen's going to riff and kind of penetrate and ask kind of journo type questions that will be a bit scary. No
pressure.
So I think a fairly reasonable assumption at an event like this is that parents are looking at multiple schools. So they've got to be comparing your school, if they're looking at your school, with other schools. I mean, all parents, when they come and look at schools these days, are generally comparison shopping. So do you have a strong sense when they come to visit you of what else they're looking at? Are they looking at similar schools, or is it apples and oranges? Perhaps, Shaun, you'd like to kick off.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be here. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And hello, nice to see you all. And thank you for sharing the passionate belief that I have as a dad, and you obviously have as parents, that the most important investment we could ever make for our children is in their education. I mean, I guess that's why we're all here today. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that is a route to the better world that we all want, and that will rest on the shoulders of our children and the education that they receive and the care that they get at home with you. So when parents come to see us, I have a very simple, perhaps slightly trite message for them, which is don't look for the best school. Look for the school which is best for your child. And we are actually remarkably different, even though there's more that unites us than separates us across our schools. There's huge amounts of shared values and priorities about pastoral care and helping find the sort of holistic excellence, brilliance, if you like, in every child. I think we all share a passionate commitment that if your child knows what you already know, which is that they are amazing, if they know that as a consequence of your care and our education, we'll have done it, we'll have won for them. All of our schools here today will share that passionate commitment, but we all do it slightly differently. So I would say, when I talk to parents who are coming to see us, I'm not interested in what's better about your school compared to the one 2 miles up the road. It's the wrong question. What's special and distinctive about your school, and how will you make my child the heart of this big family that you describe as Reigate Grammar School? That's what I would say to parents.
And Will, do you have a sense of what schools people are looking at when they come and look at Bedales?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I'm always surprised by is actually the fact that parents have a much broader kind of range of schools they're looking at generally, especially ones I think who are doing the best job in terms of looking at choice. I think one of the challenging things in this kind of forum is that the fact that you have choice, or that you potentially have choice as a parent, in some ways is harder than if you don't have choice. There are many parents in this country and in other countries whose child will just go to the school that's closest to them, and that will be a great thing, or it might not be, but they don't have a choice, so they just get on with it. If you're in this kind of environment, then I assume, as we all do, that you all can exercise that choice. And that's when it becomes in some ways more challenging, because trying to crystal ball gaze is very difficult. Looking to the future for your child is quite complex. Another thing, actually, as parents, that I often will ask them in conversations is what their education was like and the extent to which their choices are being driven by their own experiences of education. So if you haven't already talked to your partner and your child about your own educational experiences and explored maybe the way in which you might be either wanting to repeat the same thing for you if it was a positive experience, or if you're pushing back against something which wasn't a positive one, and it's fine for you to do that, but you need to do that consciously. So that's certainly something which I think is helpful as a parent, is just to kind of interrogate your own motivations and your own experience. But I would also be open-minded in the context of that about thinking, where you start off in a journey of choice can sometimes be very different in terms of where you end up. And actually, you certainly from the perspective of the head of a school like Bedales, your child should be at the center of the process, must be at the center of the process. And as such, sometimes you have to put to one side maybe some of the misgivings or the ideas that you have about what's right, particularly if that was right for you, but that might be different for your child. So actually, I think the best prepared parents are the ones actually who have quite a broad range, even if you will see at least some overlap in the Venn diagram between different educational establishments. I hope that's helpful.
I thought, yes, well, obviously, once you've read Parent Power, the new edition is out December the 1st. So I've done that now. I think that parents now feel more empowered. I think it's quite a frightening choice at times. There's a lot riding on it. It's costing a lot, particularly if you've got more than one child. So I'm quite interested in, I agree that you have to know your child first, above and beyond anything else, and your relationship with that child. And then also in looking at the school, who you have to have a relationship with that school about pastoral care, who you are going to speak to, how is it coming to you? Is it coming by email? Are you going to attend the seminars on parenting that many of the schools now offer? I think it's a long-term relationship. I also like the idea of looking beyond it and looking to see whether the community it's not just one that's there for 6 years that leaves at 18. You can really tell certain schools it's a lifelong commitment. People come back and visit. They offer a network and career advice to young students. And I find that that's something I would like to look out for. If you're investing for 5 years, why not invest for the next 50?
Can I ask you, for anyone who's from Mars who's never seen Parent Power, can you just, in like a sentence or two, just tell us what it is?
Yes, basically we release an annual league table. So we do look at the results. It's looking at GCSEs, A-levels. We're ranking those separately and then giving each school an overall ranking. We will do that for state and grammar schools, and then we will do independents as a separate list. It's gone for more than 30 years. This is my first year really taking charge of it. I see education as much more holistic than just an A-level result. And I've given myself an awful lot of work because we're now trying to provide a profile of each school to go with the list, because you can come to us and find out how a school compares in terms of their academic results, but we will now give you just a little bit more. So I've read hundreds of ISI inspection reports over the past 2 weeks. Turns out that katsu curry appears to be the menu of choice at many a school. We're looking at the school menu. We're looking at the achievements of the past year, the pastoral care and well-being, and whether or not they offer scholarships and bursaries. And I think that sense of the financial assistance or financial security, but that both the school has to have, because it's going to be quite a bumpy decade to come, as well as your financial security, are both two key issues to consider as well.
Okay, so Helen has mentioned one of the other sources of information alongside Parent Power, which is the ISI, Independent School Inspectorate Reports. They're the independent schools version of Ofsted. Ofsted subcontract to the ISI. How long that will continue for, I don't know, because it's the kind of thing that Labour might well think is a bit up for grabs. But they have a website and you can get their reports, just like you can go to Ofsted's website and get Ofsted reports. So if you haven't done it already, that's one very useful source of information. Good Schools Guide, who are sat over there, is another one. And there are various other guides. Tatler School Guide, that's being sold at the back. They also have reports. Not the back of here, I mean the back of the hall. Do you find, so parents are well armed now with quite a lot of information in a way that was really different from, say, when our parents were choosing schools? Well, actually, there wasn't, the choice was less of an issue, I think. It was more kind of, the paths were more straightforward for a previous generation. Do you find that this information is helpful, or does it create misconceptions when they arrive, Shaun?
Yeah, thank you. More information is better. I'm delighted at the direction of travel of the Parent Power Guide to, forgive me, what I'd say is to capture the notion that it's about being more than well qualified, but about being well educated. And that broader piece that you were talking about there, I think, is absolutely right. It's not just about GCSE and A-level results. They are vital because they create life chances, and they do get you into places of university study, to become a doctor, to become an engineer, to become to work in international finance, to work in as a designer or an architect. Those A-level grades do create life chances, and GCSEs similarly, but there's so much more to a great education than just the grades. And ISI is rigorous in the way it looks at safeguarding of children, for instance. That's really important. As a dad, we need to keep our children safe, don't we, and make sure they're looked after. And the Good Schools Guide, and all of that is helpful in creating that broader picture. One thing I would say is don't listen to a word that you might hear from somebody who doesn't have children in the school, who's a parent who's heard something about it at the tennis club. It's amazing how many rumours bounce around about schools based on that type of stuff. Those rigorous sort of reports and guides, talk to parents who've got children in the school, and talk to children who are in the school. That would be my best piece of advice, because it doesn't matter about marketing and stalls. It doesn't even matter about events like this one today. Talk to the children, and they will show you what the school is all about.
We had a sneak tip on, if you do go to an open day, they can be very well organised. Sneak off and go and find a toilet. Children's toilets will tell you most of what you need to know about the state of a school, and speak to a child there.
How important are children's views? Particularly if we're looking at senior schools, we've talked, all of these sources of information are quite kind of parent-aimed, aren't they? So how do children learn about schools, and how well do they understand what it is that is being offered to them?
Again, kind of answering particularly from a Bedales perspective, then we're a very child-centred school, although I think most schools would describe themselves as such. I think it does depend on the age that they are at. And I think as they get older, then I think that balance between how much input and direction parents are giving versus how much input and direction students are taking as they get older does shift. And I think certainly when they're younger, then there should be more parental kind of guidance. But I don't think, I think you should always have a child in that conversation, even if, as you explain that, you explain to them at different ages in their lives, then as a parent, you just know more information about things, or you have a better sense of what might work for them. But particularly once they get into their teenage years, then you should be giving them a lot more agency. And actually, whatever age, definitely involve them. Ways of doing that, different schools offer different things. Certainly a lot of independent schools now will offer things alongside the usual open days. They may also offer things like taster days. Certainly we offer several taster days over the course of the year with lots of different themes, whether it's music or philosophy, whether it's sport or science. These are really good ways of the young person going and experience a day in the school following a specific theme, and then they can come home and share that with you. That, alongside an open day, is really good. One way also of making a comparison is it depends on the open days. Not all open days are the same. Some are very carefully scripted and choreographed. Some won't allow parents to have any access to existing students. Others, however, do, although sometimes those students might have a very specific pathway they take you on a tour, or they may have a very specific sort of script they have to follow. Do try and have authentic conversations with students where you are permitted. Obviously, there are safeguarding things you have to think about, and do be careful about accessing those toilets when there are children present. That's my safeguarding hat on there. Naughty, naughty.
Thank you.
Is it more important, Helen, to look at GCSE results or A-levels?
Interesting. Both, and I think it depends on how you know your child. If you've got if you know your child is very academic, then you look at A-levels. You look at what else they might offer other than A-level. But if not all children are as able, and I think at that point you need to see what the GCSEs are. How best can they take your child up to 16 to make their own choices? And then also look at the gap between GCSE and A-level within that school. Are they being very selective at 16 so that sixth form is performing extremely well because it is so small and there are now fewer children, and really they lose their friends? And I think it's a very complicated area. These are the two that take people through it, so they will fill you in. I think the other point that I'm quite interested in is what do you do about a co-ed sixth form, if you go to a single-sex school, and then what do you do for A-level and sixth form and make it co-ed, and how do parents help make that choice? So that was 2 questions in one.
Great. Well, I'm going to just pick up on the GCSE A-level. I think I agree with everything you said, but I'd also look at the provision, not just the outcome. I've got 4 children going through my school. One's at university now, and Joe and Scarlett are doing. Joe's doing his A-level, Scarlett's doing her GCSEs. Very different children. Joe did computer science, Latin, DT, and statistics for his GCSEs. Scarlett's doing art, philosophy, drama, and photography. They're very different children. They need a very different story to write to be their best self. Will the school allow that child to become their best self? And you don't know at age 9, even if you tell me your child is absolutely dedicated to sport, they haven't been to our art department yet. They haven't discovered the talent that's going to emerge from them. They haven't been part of the public speaking or in the school show at Reigate Grammar School or at the school that they're going to end up. It's amazing how they can change and grow. It's a delight that they will change and grow. So don't look for the school that fits them when they're 9 or 10. Look for the school that they can grow into so that they can discover their best self. And GCSE and A-level provision and the breadth, and whether they're doing Gold Duke of Edinburgh, whether they've got a flourishing music programme and 10, 15, 20 sports, not just the 5 that you did when you were at school on their programme, because that will be the future your child needs in the 7, 8, 9 years ahead of them. I can't remember what the other question was. It was, sixth form. I think it goes back to what I said earlier on about don't look for the best school, look for what's right for your child. There are world-class schools in the independent sector that are single-sex and that are co-ed, and that are day, and that are boarding. I think we can sometimes get a bit hung, and have got faith motivations, have got specialism in performing arts, I think we can sometimes get a bit hung up on structure. I would say if you wake up at 2 in the morning thinking, my child will absolutely be great fit for that school, I'd say trust your instincts. Don't look at structures, because you can have a great single-sex school or a great co-ed school, boarding or day. What matters is it a great school?
On that front,
can I just talk about
that quickly?
I think certainly it would be remiss of me not to talk about GCSEs and A-levels as yardsticks, being a school like Latimer Upper, who are moving away from GCSEs as a 14 to 16 curriculum. I think increasingly when we look at education in the 21st century, in the future, we're going to be looking at a much broader range of things than just a series of letters or numbers, which we understand are increasingly reductive and are things which don't encompass the whole person. Certainly many of you in this room, I would imagine, are employers and you do recruitment. How many of you use GCSEs as some kind of strong yardstick for how people are doing in terms of your recruitment processes? I would hazard a guess not very many. Now, obviously, they do represent data, and data can be useful. But when you know, for example, that an English grade, for example, at A-level or at GCSE is plus or minus 1 grade, then that kind of reliability of data is really poor when you're trying to make a decision. I think one of the more useful ways of measuring schools is looking at the output in terms of where their students leave to, whether that's at 16 or 18. Look at where they're going for university. Look at whether they're going to employment routes. That's a really good way of understanding actually what their future looks like rather than just what they're doing at school. So that would be something I would really encourage you to think about. And I think I would really back up what Shaun said, that ultimately it's a bit like buying a house. When you visit a school and you meet the people and your child meets the students and you see that environment, trust what you're feeling, because that will often be one of the strongest indicators that you're in the right place. Because schools are about people, And those relationships are the things which will allow your child to thrive.
Can I just nip in quickly? I just really admire the Bedales approach to say the answer to the question about how we educate children best for the future they're going to inherit might not be GCSEs. That question is what we're all asking. How do we best educate children for the future they're going to inherit? And it might not be about GCSEs. I agree with you. But it might be. I mean, different schools will find their own solution. What I encourage is find a school which is brave and visionary and asking that question. How do we prepare children for the future they're going to inherit? Because it's got to be different from the past. And it might be about the qualifications framework, but it might be about all sorts of other things as well or instead of that. But it's the right question. It's got to be.
So in reading these replies that we've got from schools, it's interesting the growing number that won't talk about Oxbridge. It's a mention, but what you'll get is what percentage of the students went to their first choice university. So, and also looking at Ivy League and increasingly degree apprenticeships, and they're mentioned just in the small questionnaire that we sent out. So it is about the future and how you can flourish.
We've kind of our topic is comparison. How you compare. Does size of school matter? I mean, some schools are gigantic. It's quite common now to have a 2,000 student state school, for example.
I mean, as a secondary school, we start in year 9 in the senior school. We have 500 students. That's 100 per year group. That's a very deliberate strategic decision not to get any bigger. We're not pursuing a growth model because it allows for our relationships within our school community to be really strong, for our teachers to know our individual students to a degree which allows their education to really, really kind of surge forward. It also allows young people to feel really heard. And if you know anything about teenagers particularly, you know they thrive on that kind of environment. The same works for our prep and pre-prep in that we are 800 in total. That said, there are, as we talked about already, lots of different ways of doing things. We feel that's a really important model. We feel that's really strong. I do think generally pressures on education, state and private, have led to a growth-based model, which I think is sometimes at odds. That pressure is at odds with what we as teachers really would ideally like to have. But there are lots of excellent schools, and I, again, have worked in larger schools than this, who for the right student can generate an amazing outcome. But certainly from my preference, I worry about schools which are too big, because then you have to have all sorts of things in place to keep everything together, sometimes which can lead to systems which don't necessarily serve the individual child.
Well, I'll put it like this, I suppose. Every child gets a birthday card from me every time it's their birthday. And when they're 13, 16 and 18, I force them to come to a birthday party. If the weather's fine, they can hide in a corner of the head's garden. If it's not, they're stuck in my study with a piece of cake and my bad jokes. I think that's for me, that's a test of whether the school is too big, whether I can still burden them with dad jokes when they're going through their birthday phase. But I'd say I think there is a myth that a small school is more nurturing. I think a school is as pastorally capable as the care that the people give. When my second child was born, I didn't suddenly decide I really love him half as much because there's now 2 of them. I just loved more because there was 2 to love rather than 1. So look for the ethos, not the size. There are different ways of delivering the care that you would want for a child.
I wonder if you agree, Helen. I mean, I did some analysis about 5-6 years ago on which schools send more than 3 children a year to Oxbridge over average, and the most successful is a sixth form college quite near you that sends about 40 a year. And that does mean that you're in a cohort with a lot of other kids who are similar, and a similar thing's true in big universities, that you do therefore get, size produces big cohorts of like-mindedness that you don't necessarily get in small, but then small does something different. So there's a case for both, isn't there, I think?
Of course, there's a case for both. But again, I think you can only reiterate what we've talked about so far already, which is your gut instinct, the ethos of the school, and talking to your child who visits that school.
What about moving schools? Like, if you've made the wrong decision, which, you know, or I mean, or let's put it another way around, because often it's not that you've made the wrong decision. Your child just hasn't worked in the school that you've chosen for them. And some of you I recognise from the previous talk where I mentioned my daughter. She was really unhappy in primary school, and we spent 3 years really putting our hands over our ears, because my son had been incredibly happy in the same school, and it was a very nice school, but we didn't move her, and we probably should. And I do feel really guilty about that, actually. What point do you think moving schools is the right thing to do, and how will that affect how you compare schools, do you think?
And was she happier after you moved her?
Yeah, she was. So what we did, I mean, there was a nice end to this story, which is we decided at 11, a natural break point, to send her somewhere where most of the peers who were causing problems weren't going. And she made a fresh start, and it was really good. Yeah,
I mean, it will be very much about the individual in terms of the environment they're in and who they are and what's going wrong. We certainly, as educators, I think Shaun will agree with me that we've seen post-COVID higher levels of fluidity among student populations, and I know that colleagues across all sectors are experiencing the same things. Maybe lower levels of resilience in young people, which means when they're faced with challenges, sometimes it is our role as adults, educators and parents, to say, hold on a bit, let's just sort of see how we can support you, rather than necessarily just changing something, which may just be because as an adolescent or as a younger child, you're going through a growth phase, which sometimes has growing pains. Now, getting that balance right is always a really difficult thing. The most important thing is obviously you talk to your child about it, you talk as a family, but you also talk to the people who know them well in the education environment. And now it might sometimes be hard if you're thinking about a change of school to feel like you can be open with the school that your child is in at the moment. But I would encourage you to push through that, because fundamentally, no head teacher is going to get in the way of a transfer if it's the right thing for that child. And if they do, you probably don't want to have your child in that school. And while that initial anxiety might be there for you as parents, then do have that conversation. It could be you then put a plan in place, and actually you help resolve the issue and you help that young person through it, because we do want to make sure that young people are equipped with the skills to deal with adversity, and sometimes that's about staying in the same place rather than moving.
I mean, not much to add to that. It's a great question to ask a school while you're trying to decide if it's the right fit for your child. How many children move on because they don't find it to be the right fit? My mum always says no parent can be happier than their least happy child. And so it's heartbreaking if your child doesn't want to go to school. And it's the school's job, it's the adults, the parents and the school, it's the school's job to make it right for the child. If it doesn't work, then sometimes moving can be right. But there's an awful lot we can do to build the school around the child. It is one of the advantages of the independent sector, to be honest. We've got the time, the resource, the commitment, the values. We haven't got Ofsted on one shoulder and resource deficits on the other shoulder. As brilliant and principled as some of our colleagues in the state sector are, they've got that disadvantage. That's not their fault. We haven't got that, so we can change almost everything to make it right for your child. I'd say give us a chance and talk to us early. Never say the last 2 months my child's been unhappy. Talk to us on the first day that they're unhappy so we can put it right for tomorrow.
Do you think, I mean, you were talking about having multiple children at the same school. Do you think it's a good idea to send your children all to the same school? It's obviously easier in terms of pick up and drop off and all that sort of thing. But would you do the same again as a parent, or do you think you should be looking for particular? Because we talk a lot about fit and the fit between school and the child. That surely shouldn't mean the same fit for each one.
I think a lot depends. The school's ethos will be critical here. If when you talk to a school about what sort of child would be right, and they say, well, the sort of child that would fit in, then what they maybe do have in mind is the notion of certain qualities and characteristics. It might be a school that specialises in a particular need, supporting dyslexia, or a particular talent, performing arts, etc. And in which case, a particular child might have a particular aptitude for that school. Most schools, however, will want to be right for the child as they grow, and the child who uber sensitive and totally into their art at age 10 might discover a passion for the cello and become have a sort of social justice drive that means that they overcome that timidity and become a voice in the community by the time they're 16. We don't know how the child are going to grow, so I think I would say look for us. Unless there is a particular aptitude and skill or special need that is absolutely right for a particular sort of smaller set of children, I would say reassure yourself that the school will be able to provide for how your child will grow and how you don't know they're going to grow. It is one of the most delightful things, seeing your child grow into that young adult that you might have hoped for but couldn't possibly predict.
Get sibling groups, Bedales?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing to reassure parents who have, again, the luxury of choice is to say that there are many possible schools at which your child will be happy. There are many happy pathways open to them, and it's a bit like there are some people who think there's only the one in life, and if you meet your life partner and you're with them for the rest of your life, amazing, but actually you can think about it slightly differently in the sense that there could be multiple people that chance might bring you across who you might be compatible with, and it's the same thing with schools. So I think thinking about your child, then don't worry too much that you have to be individualized and totally unique in your choice making for them. And yes, I'd certainly agree that I think if there's a school, unless as we've said, that has a specific specialism, if they're too prescriptive about what they're looking for as a person, then I think you've got to be a bit worried there. But I think generally educators are open-minded because we know that young people, as Shaun has already said, develop in multiple different ways.
We're running out of time. I'm going to ask a last question of Helen, which we then just throw around the group. How many schools do you think people should have on their long list and short list?
Made me go first. I think you read widely, you read Parent Power, then it's a short list of 6, even 5. I really don't think it should be more than a handful. You're going to spend time going to visit these places. It takes time, it takes money. I'd say 5 tops, and then perhaps whittle it down to 3, and then be happy that you might go to any of those 3.
Okay, so that's your challenge. You need to get it down from
300.
Yeah, quite a few hundred to 5 to 3. I'd like to thank our panel. That was really fantastic. And if you fancy more information, our next talk is on how to pay the fees.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you and good luck.